Pierre has been a great communicator. You might remember Pierre won the World Food Prize because of 2020 Vision Initiative, 2020. You might remember what is a 2020 vision. So it's the world of free of hunger, right, by 2020. Now my presentation tried to be a bit modest by 2025. So can we end hunger sustainably by 2025? Now the reason is, right now there has been a lot of debate about the post-2015 agenda. So the previous MDG goals didn't pay enough attention to sustainable development goals. So sustainable development goals must be in the post-2015 agenda. However, we should never forget about poor and hunger. And sustainability should never be achieved at the cost of poor and hungry people. So we wanted to ensure that in the post-2015 agenda debate, let's make sure that the agenda is people-focused, ambitious, programmatic, and time-bound with clear targets. As you know, the UN Secretary General introduced a zero hunger initiative, so zero hunger in our lifetime. So I challenged him in Spain about 6 months ago, April, when WFP, FAO, and IFAD organized a high-level consultation on post-2015 agenda. I challenged Ban Ki-moon that, what do you mean in our lifetime? What do you mean in our generation? Zero hunger, how do you define zero hunger? So I was pushing them to define much clearer targets, measurable, ambitious, time-bound, precise. So that's the nature of my presentation. So the key messages of my presentation include, so number one is successful country experiences show it is feasible to eliminate hunger sustainably by 2025. So many countries have done that. Many countries will be able to do it. And second, hunger and malnutrition persist even when rapid economic growth has occurred. The case of India, the case of many other countries. And agriculture growth, social protection, and the nutrition strategies are crucial, but must be context-specific. That also comes back to Rob's presentation. So what should we do at a global level? What will be the roles for global institutions like CGI or IPRI? Are we going to force a government to adopt certain technologies or certain policies, or should we just provide support, capacity building for these countries? And a better timely measurement of hunger is needed to monitor and evaluate the progress. So we need better measures, better system to monitor the progress. And finally, again, coming back to Rob's question, country-led strategies, evidence-based policy making, and a global and inclusive partnership are needed. So more partnership instead of sort of global, centralized decision-making body. So the definitions and the state of global hunger, I think yesterday there have been a lot of discussions on this issue. I probably have missed lots of your discussions. Just wanted to emphasize a couple of figures. So 2 billion people are suffering from micronutrient deficiency, so going beyond calorie deficiency. And child undernourishment is particularly severe. For example, more than 160 million children are stunted. Almost 100 million children are underweight, and 51 million children are wasted. So I don't want to repeat what you have discussed. So successful country experiences. Look at some of the statistics for selected countries: Brazil, China, Ghana, Vietnam, and Thailand. The prevalence of undernourishment has been reduced dramatically in these countries. Look at the successful cases in Vietnam and Thailand. So their undernourishment rate has been reduced from almost 50% to less than 10% in 2 decades. My own country, China, the poverty or hunger rate was more than 50%, 60% before the agricultural reform. So today it's around 10%, probably even less than 10%. And Brazil, again, such a large country, so the hunger rate has been reduced by a large margin. We have achieved less success in the stunting reduction. However, successful countries have been able to reduce the stunting rate by half or even by 2/3, even more. For example, in the case of Brazil, the stunting rate has been reduced from more than 20% to 7%. And China, the stunting rate has been reduced from more than 35% to about 10%. Then Ghana is actually a very interesting case. So on the one hand, we have observed such a rapid reduction in hunger level, undernourishment. But we have seen less progress in the reduction in stunting. So that not only pose a question, why is that? But also point out the data issue. Do we trust this data? Are this data reliable? Now, China obviously is very clear where I have grown up, where I have experienced rapid growth in the late 70s and the early 80s, the rapid agricultural growth, led by this so-called household responsibility system. So where farmers were given the land, so they have the freedom to plant the crops they want. They also have the freedom to sell their produce to markets. Within 6 years, from 1978 to 1984, the poverty rate was reduced from more than 30%, or even, well, that's Chinese definition now, even using the Chinese definition, from more than 30% to 5%, 6% per year. So agriculture net growth. 6% agricultural growth per year has led to more than 10% reduction of hunger or poverty per year. So, and the agriculture growth has also provided a fundamental fundamentals for the later overall economic growth, urban reform, the globalization, opening up the foreign direct investment. So all this came because of the initial reform in the agriculture sector. Vietnam is another case, although it is about 7 or 8 years later than China. So they initiated this called domain reforms, where the centralized production was decentralized to each individual household. To my understanding, their land reform was actually more complete than China. And Chapachaki is sitting somewhere here. He's here. He promised to come over here. Anyway, Chapachaki was one of the World Bank staff who worked with the Vietnamese government on that reform. And in addition to the agricultural reforms, particularly a smallholder net production stimulus reforms, the investment in education, health were also very critical. So China and Vietnam had some sort of universal access to education and health for so many years, even before the reform, even during the socialist period. So that has provided some of the fundamentals for the later reform to take effect. Now, Ghana is a very fascinating case. So it's not only just agricultural growth. Yes, agricultural growth happened, particularly in cocoa sector, smallholder cocoa sector. But then in the meantime, the overall macroeconomic policies have been very friendly, or very sort of conducive to more inclusive growth, including agricultural growth. And on top of that, very stable political system and certain nutrition intervention programs. I think IPRI was involved in earlier stage. We even outposted one or two senior researchers there to work with the government to integrate nutrition into their development agenda. But the challenge is the stunting rate is still very high, and this is some puzzles we really wanted to find out why is that. Brazil, the overall economic growth, together with very effective targeted social protection programs, so zero hunger, Bolsa Familia programs, distributed cash into every household, poor households, and more importantly, linking that distribution to nutrition education outcome. So they were able to achieve such a rapid reduction in hunger, in stunting rate. So we can basically say that Brazil has eliminated hunger. So here I have to clarify that the elimination of hunger does not mean zero hunger or 0%. So 7%, 8%, this sort of residual hunger will exist in any country, even here in US, in Europe. Look at their statistics. 7%, 8% of their population are classified as hungry people. So 7%, 8% residual hunger should be allowed. Thailand is a combination of agriculture growth, social protection, and nutrition strategies. Agriculture growth, particularly in the rice sector, the smallholders benefited from various reform programs. So the rapid poverty reduction, rapid hunger reduction. But don't forget the education investment, health investment, so the nutrition interventions have added to the growth. Now, so what it would take for South Asia and Africa to eliminate hunger by 2025? We know that emerging economies such as Brazil, China, Thailand, Vietnam are more or less on track in eliminating hunger and poverty by 2025. So what would it take for India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Africa to achieve the similar success? So we did some sort of very simple calculation. The business as usual, obviously, Africa and South Asia will not be able to eliminate hunger. In fact, by 2025, the percentage of hunger and malnutrition are still very high. However, if they can learn from some of the successful stories from China, Brazil, Vietnam, they should be able to do it. So in South Asia, they need a 7% annual reduction in undernourishment, 7%. So my question is, if they can achieve 7% economic growth, well, India has been experiencing 7%, 8% economic growth for 10 years until 2 years ago, why they cannot achieve 7% annual reduction in hunger? And clearly there is a dislink between growth and hunger reduction. For Africa, a bit more effort is needed, so 9%. But even 9% is achievable. I will show you why it is achievable. Then stunting reduction is harder. However, the good news is the stunting for children will not take long time. If we have the will, if we want to work together, we should be able to achieve it. The stunting involves some sort of a very short-term solutions. The children under 5, so 5 years, maybe 10 years, we still have 12 years to 2025. Because my latest data is for 2011, so almost 13 years, 14 years. So we still have time to achieve as long as we get acts together. So 12% per year reduction is needed in terms of stunting. So agriculture growth, particularly for the countries where the agriculture is still predominant, social protection and nutrition strategies are very crucial, but must be context specific because the countries are different. Even within the same country, the different regions have different context. So context specific policies, strategies, and investments are needed. So the role of agricultural growth is critical. Again, I'm not going to steal the thunder from Peter Hazel. I'm pretty sure probably he will elaborate on that. For some of our studies, particularly in Africa, we show that for every 1% growth in some of the stable crops like maize, even pulses is very nutritious food we heard from yesterday. Every 1% growth in maize, in pulses, there will be almost 2% reduction in calorie growth, in calorie deficiency. So 1 to 2. So if you have 4% growth in these sectors per year, which means that you can reduce calorie deficiency by 8%. Is it close to the target we just mentioned? Now we are working on the elasticity of the stunting reduction with respect to growth in vegetables and fruits. So here from IPRI, maybe in several months. But the bottom line is targeted growth, inclusive growth, will be able to bring hunger reduction, stunting reduction by a big margin. The role of social protection strategies. I wish some of the emerging economies, particularly China and Vietnam, could have launched this program much earlier. So China's poverty reduction came from inclusive growth, particularly agriculture net growth. They only started to launch social protection program maybe 10 years ago. If they have done that much earlier, I think the poverty reduction, hunger reduction could be much faster. I think Joachim von Braun made that statement some years ago. That's a lesson Africans should have learned from the mistake China, Vietnam had. That should Africa launch their social protection program much earlier, in a much larger scale. Now the related question is cash better than food? Or is food better than vouchers? Or is vouchers better than others? Again, it should be context specific. But the general thinking is, in many cases, cash is better than food. Look at some of the studies, IPRI studies from Ecuador, from Uganda. So in many cases, voucher is better than cash. Cash is better than food. In terms, not only in terms of calorie deficiency reduction, but also in terms of diet quality, particularly diet quality. So cash vouchers have much bigger impact on improvement in diet quality of poor than food. Now, role of nutrition strategies. You might remember sometime in May, the latest Lancet series has several articles related to the role of nutrition strategies in reducing hunger and poverty. I remember, Per, did you write a synthesis on that? But I only remember IPRI authored two of them. Harold is sitting here. Harold was one of the authors. So we need two types of nutrition strategies. One is nutrition-specific interventions, micronutrient supplementation, and so on. Another type is nutrition-sensitive programs, so early child development, linking agriculture to nutrition. So this is one of the areas CGIAR or IPRI have a unique advantage, that is to link agriculture growth, food production, food system. Well, that study we discussed about the food system, linked to nutrition, sharper focus. I also heard some brief discussion this morning from Julian and Phil. They said, well, we shouldn't just try to invest more in nutrition research in our agriculture research portfolio. I fully agree. However, we can do better to link agriculture research to nutrition outcome. So we do agriculture research. Yes, we increase our investment in agriculture research, but make sure that agriculture research will lead to more nutritious food production. So not simply rice, wheat, and maize. Now, the better and timely measurement of hunger is so critical. We have mentioned the various figures. 2 billion people are suffering from heat and hunger, the lack of micronutrients. 870 million people are suffering from calorie deficiency, and so on and so on. Are these data reliable? Should we do a better job? So undernourishment indicator is still very much needed, but it's too narrow. It only includes a macronutrient, not a micronutrient. And some of the methodologies are fundamentally wrong, are flawed. We need to improve the methodologies in collecting the data, in come up even the 870 million hungry people. And insufficient up-to-date data, frequent updates are very crucial. So in many cases, we collect certain crucial data every 5 years, not every year, not every quarter. And a poor data collection infrastructure, it really hints us in collecting much better, accurate data. So for the 2015 agenda, the good question is, what sort of indicators we should push? Food and nutrition community should push. My suggestion is we should select several key indicators, not a laundry list. A laundry list will make everybody bored. So some key ones. We still know that FAO, the undernourishment, is very important. However, the methodology needs to be improved. The parameters and also the sampling of the households needs to be more timely. The methodology needs to revise more frequently to reflect the distributional impact of various food production. Dietary quality indicators, that's the one area we have not paid enough attention. We got to work on this. IPRI has been arguing that for almost 10 years, maybe even more. How can we construct a dietary quality indicator where we can measure, where we can make the food system accountable for our success? We need to collect this data more frequently and more important at a national level or even sub-regional level. The prevalence of stunting. This data is so critical. Evidence has shown that probably this is the most important indicator to measure the nutrition of our children. We need more frequent data, not every 5 years. We need them every year. We need this data for every country. And underweight and wasting, we know these are not good long-term nutrition indicators, but we need them because there will be shocks. Shocks may become more frequent. How can we measure the impact of shocks on people's nutrition in short term? We don't need to connect all this data everywhere, every country. We can target the connection of the data in some of the hot spots where they are very vulnerable to shocks, whether it's weather shocks, conflicts, or any other shocks. So here I wanted to support Rob's point that we needed to support country-led strategies, evidence-based policymaking, and a global inclusive partnership. I'm not going to go through my slides. I just wanted to emphasize one point, that is country-led strategies. Country-led strategy will be so critical. So their capacity in driving, in owning, in leading their strategies, their interventions, their investments is so critical. Unless they have that capacity, I'm afraid we will not be able to eliminate hunger and poverty by 2025. Thank you.